Watch right now on the Front News Project. Russian air defense is only for Red Square and the parade, while explosions are happening all over Russia. The Battle of Kursk continues. The Ukrainian armed forces are advancing again. Kherson region. The Russian army is preparing a new ground operation. The enemy wants to storm the right bank. Fiery, intense, and blazing footage from the front lines. Watch right now. The bloody war continues. A war that Vladimir Putin and his gang unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in their fight, for freedom, continues. Greetings, this is Front News. Vladimir Timoshenko is with you. For the next 30 minutes, you'll get the truth about the war, uncovered by our journalists from the hottest combat zones. So, are you ready? Then, let's begin. And we'll start right away with exclusive material. The Kremlin was so hysterically afraid of a Ukrainian strike on Red Square on May 9th that they pulled every possible air defense system into the Russian capital. As a result, military facilities on Russian territory were left exposed. It seems that Putin wasn't too concerned about that. He only thinks about his own safety. But that was a mistake. It was a hellish night for Russia. Ukrainian drones delivered powerful strikes on airfields and other military targets. There were fires and explosions in Mordovia, Tula, Saransk, and other regions. Putin seemed so tense that he immediately started threatening Kiev with strikes using the Oreshnik missile system. But there is even more terrifying news. Russian Federation war criminals once again shot Ukrainian prisoners of war, once again violating every possible international convention. More details on all these topics are coming up in the report.
Drone.
Where is it?
Russia is on fire. Several key defense enterprises and airfields have been hit. Powerful explosions were heard in Tula. Two of the largest defense industry enterprises came under attack. Both plants are part of the state corporation Rostec. And in Saransk, Russia, 3 factories once again came under drone attack today, as well as the previously targeted optical fiber systems plant. A fire broke out there. It is here that the occupiers produce special cables for controlling drones. And drones also struck 2 airfields, Shaikovka and Kubinka. They are located in the Kaluga and Moscow regions.
Once again, Russian air defense has demonstrated its complete ineffectiveness. The point is that practically all air defense systems are currently concentrated on protecting the victory parade madness in Moscow. In other words, the main strategic object for the Russian military and political leadership is Moscow and the Moscow region. But as we can see, things are not calm even in the Moscow region.
It's simple. Putin has never cared about the other regions. The most important thing for him is to protect himself, especially on the eve of May 9th. All the air defense systems, wherever they might have been pulled into Moscow. All week in Russia, hysteria has been growing over the possibility that Ukraine might strike Red Square and embarrass the Kremlin in front of the allies coming for the parade. And Putin is so hysterical about this that he's once again shaking his little hazel stick. Kremlin propagandists are claiming that the bunker dweller has given an order regarding the use of the hazel stick as a response to potential attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces on Moscow.
This is a preemptive move aimed at, accordingly, creating an information environment concerning the possible use of these means of destruction. And by the way, the emergence of this information indicates possible scenarios. By Russian special services whispered 2-stage provocations on the territory of the Russian Federation, which would then provide an excuse to use these means of destruction.
And while Putin is preparing provocations, the defense forces have launched a new offensive in the Kursk region, according to complaints from Russians. According to them, Ukrainian units have concentrated personnel opposite the settlement of Tetkino and have blown up a bridge near the border.
In addition, Ukraine's defense forces are carrying out preemptive strikes on the Russian army's rear logistics infrastructure, specifically the bridges over the Dnipro River. At the moment, according to reports from the Russian side, 2 bridges have been destroyed, which effectively eliminates the Russian army's ability to redeploy personnel, resupply ammunition, and evacuate the wounded.
Meanwhile, the Russian occupation forces are violating all the rules of war. During assault operations, the occupiers surrounded Ukrainian soldiers, forced them to lay down their arms and surrender. After that, they were shot with automatic weapons.
This is yet another example of the Russian Federation violating the very agreements on prisoners of war that it has ratified. In other words, these are the fundamental provisions of the Geneva Convention, which the Russian Federation has once again publicly and effectively torn apart. Moreover, it should be noted that once again we are talking about the demonstrative nature of the execution of Ukrainian prisoners of war.
Meanwhile, a new war has broken out in the world. India has attacked Pakistani territory with missiles. Strikes were carried out on 3 locations.
In my opinion, the escalation of this armed conflict between 2 nuclear powers, according to the thinking of the Russian special services, is meant to divert attention from the Ukrainian issue and accordingly shift the focus of the international community to the Indo-Pakistani war. And this accordingly means the disruption of all peace processes regarding the Ukrainian issue and essentially a pause in the provision of military technical assistance to our country from both the United States and our European partners. Therefore, I do not rule out that the escalation on the Indo-Pakistani border is a multi-pronged operation by the Russian special services.
As we can see, the situation in the world is heating up, but everyone understands perfectly well the main evil in the world is located in the Kremlin.
And it was also a very frightening week for the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. The enemy shelled the city brutally, several times. Most recently, 2 people were killed and 6 injured in Kiev as a result of a Shahed drone attack on May 7th. Debris caused destruction in 3 districts of Kiev. Apartment buildings were damaged and fires destroyed several apartments. It was in the Shevchenkivsky district that the 2 fatalities occurred. Another 4 people were hospitalized. In the Sviatoshinsky district, several apartments were burned out, cars were damaged, and trees were knocked down. Fortunately, all residents survived and only suffered minor injuries. Medical teams arrived at the scene within minutes and provided the necessary assistance. Emergency workers also managed to extinguish the flames almost immediately. A relief. Headquarters was set up at the scene. All the details from the scene are in the report by our colleagues from the television news service.
There are far fewer emergency personnel here now in the Shevchenkivsky district near the building where the latest Russian terrorist attack took place. But the aftermath is still being dealt with. In particular, on the upper floors where you can see a huge hole in the wall. That is the apartment where 2 people died, a mother and her son. He was 28 years old. They couldn't make it down to the shelter because the young man was part of a low-mobility group. On top of that, they were volunteers and helped rescue pets. In particular, according to their neighbors, they themselves had 10 cats. 1 kitten, or perhaps it was an adult cat, was saved. It was injured by fire or the explosion and was handed over to veterinarians. Another 5 animals were found dead in the apartment. There are 15 apartments in this entrance and 10 of them were damaged. Some people are still not being allowed into the apartments with the most damage to retrieve their belongings if they need to. Some are still searching for their acquaintances. People are coming from neighboring buildings. They were also looking for a woman who worked in a grocery store. She was on shift at the grocery store.
I asked the girls. They say she's alive, everything is fine. The apartment is flooded and now they're throwing everything out of there. It's a nightmare, to put it simply.
I wasn't sleeping in Borshchahivka. They called me back. There was an explosion around 3 o'clock and then something was flying. You could hear the sound and then an explosion.
Psychologists are still working at the scene and an emergency operations center has been set up. Here people can file a claim for compensation for their property or receive certain payments, says the head of the Shevchenkivsky District Council.
You can receive a one-time payment under the city's care program. That's 10,000 hryvnias. And those whose apartments are currently uninhabitable can receive 40,000 hryvnias to rent housing, while the issue of restoring their home is being resolved.
At the moment, traffic in this area has been restored for both public transport and other civilian vehicles. There are no obstacles. And to sum up, I'll say that during this latest Russian terrorist attack against the civilian population, residential buildings, a pharmacy, a Yuka Pochta branch, and a grocery store were damaged. Moreover, there were significantly more strikes in the capital today, and the destruction is also greater. There are also more casualties. 6:15 in the morning. White smoke is rising from the upper floors of a residential building in the Shevchenkivsky district right above the metro station. Firefighters are finishing extinguishing the flames after enemy metal debris struck the building. Police are restricting traffic. Svetlana's apartment is located just below the one that burned out. She still can't believe that she and her family survived. The apartment above is completely burned out. It will have to be rebuilt.
All we heard was an explosion. We jumped up from the blast. Then we heard something flying and realized it was very close. We immediately started running to the hallway. We heard explosions. We heard the windows shatter.
Live on TSN, Kyiv State Emergency Service spokesperson Pavlo Petrenko reports districts on both banks of the Dnipro in the capital are under attack. Uranium itself is smoking.
Since early morning, rescuers have been working in 3 districts of the city. These are Shevchenkivsky, Sviatoshinsky and Dniprovsky districts. Right here, in the Shevchenkivsky district, as you can see, there was an impact on the technical floor of a 5-story residential building.
And this is already the Sviatoshinsky district of the capital, not far from the ring road. The top 5 floors of a 9-story building are blackened from the fire. Several cars are damaged, and there are broken branches on the grass. Locals have gathered in the courtyard, recalling the details of that night.
We had a lively night, but then there were 3 explosions before 4 a.m. or at 4 a.m. And then this happened. Everyone arrived quickly, the firefighters, the ambulance, and the police. Everyone is helping.
A relief center was set up not far from the damaged building. The police are taking statements from the owners of damaged apartments. Anyone who wants can have tea, coffee, or a snack with some cookies. Psychologists are working on site. Red Cross specialists are providing medical assistance, in particular to 8th grader Vitaly Samus. The boy says he regained consciousness just moments before the strike hit his bedroom.
The strike hit and I was in my blanket and I got completely covered with shrapnel like this. I woke up quickly and saw this ring of fire right in front of me. It was right in front of my eyes, bright orange, completely covering the window. And I was hit by a wave of heat. I also have a cut on my leg and a little more on my knee.
You won't go to school?
I don't know. I need to ask my mom.
With the end of the 3rd air raid alert. Of the night, street cleaners head out to work, up clearing the trash bins. After yet another terrorist attack by the Russians, the workday in Kiev begins as scheduled.
And now an analysis of the current operational situation on the Pokrovsk front. The bloody rampage of the enemy army continues here as well. In the Pokrovsky direction, the occupiers carried out 24 assaults in the areas of the settlements of Malinovka, Lisovka, Inkotlino, Zverevo, Udaknoye, Novosergivka, Novoalexandrovka, Nadeyevka, Bogdanovka, Andreyevka, Ekudaiche, as well as in the directions of the settlements of Bogatyr, Oboz, Alexeyevka, Doko, Novaya Poltavka, Kotliarovka. The defense forces have repelled 19 attacks. 5 clashes are still ongoing. Meanwhile, in the Kherson region, the Russians may be preparing to storm the right bank. The Ukrainian armed forces in Chertern are once again breaking through in the Kursk region. Near Toretsk, the Ukrainian army is also advancing. And now the Russians are only 3 kilometers away from the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. We have gathered the latest news about what is happening on the front lines right now and analyzed which of these reports are accurate and which are not. Let's watch.
For several days now, Russian war correspondents and Z channels have been claiming that the Ukrainian armed forces have launched an offensive near the village of Tetkino and the settlement of Popovo-Leżachi. In the Glushkovsky district, not so long ago, Russian generals were saying that they had driven the Ukrainian armed forces out of the Kursk region. But it turns out the Ukrainian army is once again on Russian soil.
The enemy has launched a new offensive in the Kursk region, trying to cut off Tetkino. At night, the enemy blew up bridges with missiles and in the morning sent armored groups into the attack. First, mine-clearing vehicles began making passages through the minefields, followed by armored vehicles carrying troops. There is heavy fighting on the border. Our paratroopers and other units are destroying the enemy.
The Russian Federation redeployed part of its troops from the Kursk region to other directions. And it seems that the Ukrainian armed forces took advantage of the element of surprise and launched a new counterattack in the Kursk region.
When Gerasimov reported to Putin that they had completely liberated the Kursk territory, that did not correspond to reality. But we withdrew, and they pulled out a large number of forces and equipment. There were up to 90,000 Tosh of them on a relatively small section of the front. They were moved to the Kharkiv, possibly the Pokrovsk direction, and now our actions near Tyotkino, a counterattack in response. Alexei Hetman, military analyst.
In the Kherson region, Russian occupiers are beginning preparations for an airborne operation. Since the end of April, the Russian army has been attempting to land troops on small islands that are currently under the control of Ukrainian defense forces.
The enemy is trying to create a water barrier to form straits in the southern part of the Dnipro area, where Bugas and Kozulisky Island are located, and to land troops on these islands, establish a small bridgehead there and carry out a crossing of the Dnipro in war, this southern zone.
The Russian army plans to gradually seize the islands, which will allow them to expand the area of engagement for Russian equipment. Preparations are underway for an amphibious operation, particularly involving unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, as well as mortars.
Enemy vehicles appear there from time to time. There are multiple launch rocket systems, and from there we are also subjected to a large number of attacks on the city of Kharkiv in the Mykolaiv region. What does this operation give the Russian side? The more islands they manage to capture, the more firing positions they will have closer to our rear areas.
The Ukrainian command of the Defense Forces South is aware of such plans and maneuvers, and they are monitoring the movement of literally every boat and every mortar. At present, the enemy does not have enough watercraft or personnel in the Kherson direction to carry out such a large-scale assault. The most tense area on the front right now is the border between Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. The commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Syrskyi, wrote that the Pokrovsk direction is one of the most difficult sections of the Russian-Ukrainian warfront. According to him, the Defense Forces soldiers were able to stabilize the situation in this operational zone in Donetsk region and in some places even seize the tactical initiative.
According to the data from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, the intensity of combat operations has increased significantly over the past week. In just 6 days this week, there have already been 1,219 attacks compared to 1,150 over 7 days last week. The enemy was most active this week on the Pokrovsk sector. 42% of all attacks occurred there. High intensity also remains on the Novopavlivka sector, 13.7%, Nagol, the Lyman sector, 12.7%, and the Kurakov sector, 12%. Altogether, these four directions account for 80% of all enemy assault actions.
Despite the fact that the Russian army is only 2.5 kilometers away from the administrative border of the Dnipropetrovsk region, the front in this sector remains stable, and the Ukrainian armed forces are in control. The occupiers' advance in this direction has been halted.
And now it's time to analyze the current situation on the Kharkiv, Kupiansk, and Lyman fronts. The Russian world continues here as well to destroy, kill, and maim. On the Kharkiv front, the aggressors launched assaults 6 times near the settlements of Vovchanska, Vovchansky Kutory, and Kamenka. Currently, 4 clashes are ongoing. On the Kupiansk front, the enemy launched assaults 3 times near Hlushkivka and Novokrugliakivka. On the Lyman front, the Russians advanced 9 times near the settlements of Kopanki, Rakivka, and Kolodyazy, as well as towards Redkodub, Novyemir, and Olhivka. 3 clashes are still ongoing. And of course, this week has once again been hellishly difficult for Ukrainian Kharkiv. The enemy attacks the city almost every day. As a result of a massive Russian drone attack on the morning of May 6th, a fire broke out at Barabashovo, the largest market in the city. Also, 6 people remain hospitalized after a nighttime attack on Kharkiv a few days earlier. The occupiers once again used drones with thermobaric warheads, which caused massive destruction of structures and numerous injuries to people, often incompatible with life. A total of 51 victims sought medical assistance. Damage has been recorded in 4 Nuts districts of the city. TSN correspondent Yulia Boyko will tell you more about the consequences of the terrible, brutal night attack.
This is the Slobidskiye district of Kharkiv. It was here that a kamikaze drone struck directly at parked cars. As a result of the explosion, a fire broke out that took several hours to extinguish. At this moment, the only reminders of the night attack here are a burned-out car, shattered windows in the houses, and a damaged shop. This is just one of the locations where Shahed struck during the night. A total of 17 drones, 4 districts of the city came under attack. Private houses, apartment buildings, and infrastructure facilities were damaged.
It was very frightening, really frightening. If I hadn't left 5 minutes earlier, I don't even know what would have happened to me. Everything is covered in glass. Do you see how much we're carrying out? Look, I live on the 6th floor. Those are my 2 windows. Thankfully, I went out into the hallway. All the windows were blown out. We heard the shahids. At first, we just heard the sound and went out into the hallway. Then we could hear them exploding and the windows shattering.
At one of the locations, an explosive object was found, likely an unexploded charge. Right now, bomb disposal experts are examining it. They suspect it could be a cluster munition, similar to those used in the recent attack on Kiev.
After a similar charge was found in Kiev, we need to be extremely careful, because anything is possible. And until the bomb disposal experts have finished their work, no one should come near, pick anything up, or even be nearby.
According to the latest information, 51 people have sought medical assistance, 14 of them with injuries from glass shards. Others are experiencing acute stress reactions. 6 of the injured remain in city hospitals, including an 11-year-old child. Throughout the night, ambulance crews and rescue workers were on site where the strikes occurred. Despite the threat of repeated attacks, assistance centers for victims are currently operating in the city. Utility workers, bomb disposal experts, and the State Emergency Service are all on duty.
And now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Kramatorsk and Toretsk fronts. The enemy, as usual, he is acting ferociously here as well. On the Kramatorsk front, our defenders are currently repelling 2 attempts by the occupiers to advance near Bilahora and Chasiv Yar. 4 clashes have been successfully concluded. On the Toretsk front, the enemy attacked 8 times near Shcherbinivka and Toretsk, as well as in the direction of Hlivitske. 1 clash is still ongoing. The war is changing, and it is changing very significantly and very quickly. Aerial and ground drones are transforming the battlefield. Gray zones will most likely expand due to the range of drone operations. While aerial drones have long become an integral part of the Ukrainian armed forces units, ground drones are only now being introduced to Ukrainian defenders. But this is happening very quickly, as there is an enormous need for them. The thing is, ground drones are used both for evacuation and for delivering ammunition. These drones also make life easier for sappers, who no longer have to carry heavy anti-tank mines by hand. Ground drones also assist. The infantry, as a machine gun mounted on a drone, can now provide cover from a certain distance. All the details are in the report by TSN journalist Ihor Bondarenko.
Fartovi artistically squeezes mayonnaise onto a loaf for a tasty sandwich. He has just returned from the front line. For an infantryman, this is one of the toughest tasks in war. The journey to the position and the return from the line of engagement.
Constantly 300 and much more than 200 when entering and exiting.
Each soldier carries dozens of kilograms of gear, ammunition, and provisions, hauling several kilos to the trench under shelling and FPV drone attacks. The number of casualties during such marches keeps increasing. But despite this, Ukrainian soldiers have found a way to make life easier for the infantry. Ground robots have come to the rescue.
Ground robotic systems can take over, in fact, the main functions performed by infantry soldiers. What do I mean by that, sorry? Logistics, evacuation, mining, demining, surveillance, fire support, and destroying the enemy as kamikaze units.
Combat brigades of the Ukrainian armed forces have been successfully using ground robots on the front lines for almost a year, delivering ammunition and food, evacuating wounded and fallen soldiers. There have already been hundreds of such operations involving ground drones. However, the main task is to destroy the enemy. And robots are capable of that as well. This kind of machine can lay mines on an area many times faster than a sapper. Anti-personnel mines are capable of slowing down the enemy's advance or stopping a sudden breakthrough. And the main danger for the sapper is now taken on by the drone.
If we didn't have them, we would have to do all this by hand. Before drones, everything had to be done manually. Now that we have drones, all the work is done by them.
Ukrainian developers went even further and made the mechanized platform universal. In addition to transporting cargo, evacuation, and mining, the Smart Wheel can also clear mines, conduct reconnaissance, and provide surveillance. Engineers spent only 6 months developing the drone.
We have speed and motivation because we not only have to survive, we have to defeat the enemy. For that we need stable technologies, and they must be our own.
Just a year ago, only about a dozen Ukrainian companies were developing robotic ground systems for the Ukrainian military. The government purchased only 600 robots. This year, under contract, there are 8,000.
There were 12 or 13 at the beginning of 24. At the beginning of 25, we can state that we have more than 60 manufacturers of ground robotic systems. Each manufacturer has at least 3 or 4 models for different uses, such as mining, demining, logistics, relay stations, and even electronic warfare equipment is being installed.
More than 100 foreign companies from 25 countries around the world are lining up not to sell their developments to Ukraine, but because they want to learn from Ukrainian experience and jointly produce new models of ground robots which are immediately tested in combat conditions. Kamikaze drones and drones equipped with turrets are already actively destroying enemy fortifications and enemy personnel. Ukrainian engineers and military personnel predict that ground drones are capable of changing the nature and even the course of the war, just as strike drones once did.
We have a very clear objective. It's called a kill zone, a place the enemy simply won't enter. How we will achieve this with the help of UGVs, time will tell.
Alexander Yabchenko notes that robots will not be able to fully replace infantry, but they can significantly ease the conduct of war. The technology race will be won by whoever adapts and scales up ground systems across the entire front line the fastest. There is no longer any doubt. Ukraine is becoming a key military force capable of protecting Europe from Russian darkness. And now we move to the Novopavlivka, Huliaipol and Kharkiv sectors of the front. Here too the situation is, as usual, extremely tense. In the Novopavlivka direction, our soldiers repelled 12 attacks near Konstantinopil, Novoselki, Volnepol and towards Novopil, Bohatyr and Otradne. One engagement is still ongoing. In the Huliaipol direction, one attempt by the invaders to advance near Vysok was successfully stopped. At the same time, the aggressors carried out airstrikes on Malinivka, Vysoky and Huliaipol. In the Kharkiv direction, the armed forces of Ukraine stopped 4 assaults near Stepov and Kamyanske. In Zaporizhzhia, as a result of a Russian drone attack on the night of Wednesday, May 7th, 4 people were injured at once and residential buildings were destroyed and damaged. According to the head of the regional military administration, Ivan Fedorov, according to him, 7 apartment buildings and 14 private houses, as well as infrastructure facilities, were damaged. 1 private house was completely destroyed. All the details are in the following report by TSN correspondent Kira Oves.
Anastasia Babenko. During the night, there were more than a dozen Shaheds over the city. Explosions could be heard in different districts of Zaporizhzhia. As a result of the attack, fires broke out and there were power outages. And this is what one of the impact sites looks like now. This is a private house. It has been completely destroyed. At night, emergency workers were pulling people out from under the rubble of the house. Subtitles by Dmytro Zog.
Hang in there. This is already the 3rd time, so we've survived so far.
Volodymyr lives next door to the destroyed house. The blast was so powerful that in his house, the shockwave and debris shattered all the windows, tore off the roofing sheets, and destroyed the garage.
My wife felt unwell, so we were taken to a hostel, and there they called an ambulance, checked her blood pressure. And we were at home at the moment when it hit. If someone was on the street, you see what is happening already. We would be without eyes, without anything. If someone had been outside, you see what's happening. We would already be without lozed, without anything.
At least 13 explosions were heard in the city. 4 people were injured. They have fractures, burns, and abrasions. Men aged 35 and 49 are in moderate condition. 2 more of the injured are being treated as outpatients. In total, more than 20 houses, including 7 apartment buildings, have been damaged. Infrastructure facilities have also been destroyed, including critical ones. Since last night, utility workers have been on site, primarily covering up windows.
At the moment, workers from the utility, special and emergency rescue services are carrying out actions to eliminate the aftermath of the strike. Namely, clearing debris, dismantling hazardous structures, removing destroyed roofing, searching for personal belongings and hauling away trash.
Literally within 2 hours after the strike, specialists were able to restore electricity supply. At this moment, power has been restored to all homes.
That's all for today, but very soon, Front News will bring you new, unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Tymoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.